Chewie, I think I'd like to start with James Meager. It appears that Winston Peters won't be very happy at the moment because James Meager does appear very much to be a DEI hire. James Meager appears to be someone who has been put in the ministerial role as a tokenistic South Islander. Because he himself basically says to Jack Tame, he's not needed. Because, of course, ministers get into the situation where they can't criticise other ministers or the Prime Minister. So basically, to have a need of a South Island minister means that the government's not doing well. But he can't say they're not doing well. All the ministers are doing perfectly for the South Island. Well, then why do we need a South Island minister? And the story goes around and around and around from the weekend.
You are the minister for the South Island. So the South Island makes up 23% of the population, 22% of GDP. Interesting,
eh? So 1 in 4. So South Island should have 1 in 4 cabinet seats, 1 in 4 ministers, 1 in 4 responsibilities. It's actually a really interesting point. Talking about DEI, we don't have that. We've got 1. So we've been throwing our token, our DEI minister.
But as I'm sure you're aware, there are twice as many Chris's in Cabinet than there are ministers from the South Island. What does that say about the regard your government has for the people of the South?
Well, obviously Chris is a very popular name, and I'm very disappointed that we seem to be tracking downwards in terms of the number of Jameses in Parliament. We've already lost 1 this term, and I'm not hoping that we'll lose any more. Look, I think what it reflects is that if you were looking for a perfectly proportional representative Parliament, the only way to get that absolutely pin perfect would be to go and do some sort of weighted ranking program.
There's pin perfect, like perfectly representative, and then there's 1 South Island minister in the whole of Cabinet.
Oh, in Cabinet, right.
There's that saying about something to do with, I'm not going to get it right. You don't let perfect get in the way of good. It's not even good. One in Cabinet is not even good. So let's not let perfect get in the way of at least making it decent.
Yeah, okay, I follow your point. There is difficulties, I guess, with this particular cabinet because there are coalition considerations to go into, and there are decisions around making sure.
That's fairish. You don't have the full cabinet all to yourself. Yeah, there's a point there. Give him his due.
You've got the best person for the job, but ultimately I think that your cabinet should be made up of the best people for the job. And what I maybe need to do as a South Island minister is, as we lead up to the next election, make sure that when I'm out there, I'm advocating for as many good, high quality South Island candidates to come through our system, to get into Parliament, to make sure that we can have much more of a broader offering to get more South Islanders into Cabinet. But ultimately...
So you're saying at the moment, there actually isn't, if it's merit-based, keeping in mind the coalition considerations, there aren't South Island ministers who are good enough to be in Cabinet?
Oh, well, there absolutely are, and you see that...
That's a very good point.
You're the old shit.
I think the best people should be in Cabinet. So therefore, no one's good enough from the South Island to be in there. Again, just highlighting the South Island has this DEI minister. There you go.
There is an excellent South Island minister in Cabinet, and of course the Prime Minister would consider himself to be a South Islander at heart just because he's been living across the Cook Strait for a while. I think he still has his Crusaders top underneath his jersey whenever he comes to caucus. But look, ultimately what you want out of your Cabinet is you want a high quality Cabinet, a group of ministers who are focused on decisions that are the best for the country. And to a certain extent, it's helpful to have geographic representation from across the board because that helps you identify particular issues that it might affect a particular geographic region differently. That's part of my job, is to provide that lens where there's a government policy or a project which might have a particular impact on the South Island. I'm to feed into ministers on that. But actually, we've got clever enough people to recognise that they're making decisions on behalf of the whole country, and where a housing issue or where a health issue affects Dunedin differently to Dannevirke, that will do that.
So what's the point in you?
Yeah.
Well, the point of me is to make sure that we've got a large geographic area down here. Not all parts of the South Island have the same issues. We've got common themes.
See, so like in one breath it is important to have representation, in one breath it isn't.
Well, I think I'm not there for representation. I think I'm there to make sure that particular issues and perhaps...
But you've just said
policies,
that the Cabinet is keeping an eye on these different issues, and they're able to, they're able to consider the issues that are most pertinent to the region.
Yeah, and they do their best, but it is hard to get around the South Island. I mean, I've spent the last 3 months trying to get around as much of my home as possible. I spent 3.5 days on the West Coast last week, and I still wasn't able to traverse a fraction of the electorate.
3.5 days?
Yeah, well, I mean, Jack is very swift with his thought process, because if
He was so close to just going, bro, what are you even for?
yeah, well, I mean, and the point was, that's good journalism. You're engaging with the interview. He's saying all the ministers are really good at thinking about the South Island. Well, you don't need a minister for the South Island then. Now, one other thing before I throw it to you, Chewie, because we should now see, this is only going to be 10, 15 seconds. Jack actually specifically wants to know, okay, so what have you done for the South Island?
Okay,
Yes,
you got no department, you got no budget. Last I checked, written questions, no KPIs, no seat at the cabinet table. Can you give us a specific example, though, of a cabinet colleague's decision that you have influenced since being appointed to the job?
Not yet, because the particular decisions I'm thinking about haven't quite yet been made or released.
And then he goes on to say none. So, no, he's, because he says his job is there is to basically have the ear of the ministers so he can give a South Island perspective. When have you done that? Oh, yeah, haven't done that at all yet, Chewie. There's nothing going on in the South Island. Nothing like, hospitals and that kind of, nothing like that going on. I haven't got the ear of any minister.
He could even pick. He's got his choice of hospitals that he could bring up. Like the only acceptable answer that I would have heard there from Mr. Meager is, I lurk outside Simeon Brown's office so I can push him up against the wall and say, why are we cutting emergency beds from the hospital that we promised no cuts to? Like, this is the thing. Like, if you want to convince me that this is a real fucking job that you've been given, that the Minister for the South Island is a real thing, then your job is a conduit. If you're not in cabinet, if you're not making these decisions, if you're not helping us, at least be a way of communication to be happening. You're telling South Islanders, you're coming to Dunedin and telling us what you are doing. You were in Dunedin this weekend. We found out about it after you were gone. Luxon was in Dunedin. Nicola Willis was in Dunedin. All this weekend, Regional National Party Conference. Not advertised. People didn't know about it until the last minute. I wonder why. But yes, he could be a conduit of explaining to us what Cabinet are doing. He can be a conduit to Cabinet by going, hey, a biggest landmass that's comprised of the farmers that vote for us, the miners that want us to do stuff, and the people that we're building infrastructure for, they're not happy. And this is why, and maybe we can get ahead of it and stop it from happening before the election. He doesn't seem to be doing this. He's been in our comments on the YouTube.
Has
videos.
he?
Yes, I've seen two.
Sorry to reveal my my finally behind the about how little I look at the YouTube. I apologize. Really? Okay.
He posted quite a good clarification a couple of weeks ago on a video that we had posted. Maybe it was on YouTube, maybe it was on Facebook. One or the other. But I was like, oh, thank you very much. That's very good. You are welcome to come on the show and speak to these issues if you want. Radio silence. Yeah. So, Mr. Meager, if you're listening, we're from the South Island. We talk to a lot of people nationwide, but there's a lot of Southerners that listen to this. We have issues we'd like to talk to you about. If you want to do this job and show us that you're the Minister for the South Island and it's actually a worthwhile thing that you're doing, drop us an email, bighairynews@gmail.com.
I think it's probably fair to say we're the largest news media company in Dunedin at the moment. So I've seen the subscription figures to the ODT, so it's probably fair to say. Yeah, there you go. Oh, very interesting. Howie has just come.
One thing I will say first, before we move on, in that interview, and this is notable because it's unusual now. Now, yes, he got called out on a couple of missteps, but didn't he sound like an actual rational human being that was thinking of things before he said them?
Yeah.
There weren't any like vocal crutches or tics or anything like that, or coached lines of that. He literally seemed to be a person, considering what he was saying, that seemed kind of more human than we get out of any minister at the moment. Would you agree? Kind of refreshing.
Yeah. All right. I'll give him that. That's very true. I watched the whole lot. I had more things to show us, but with the Erica email things that come up, we're not gonna do any more of that with it. But yeah, on reflection, it didn't sound like we didn't hear any of the 9th floor PR words coming out.
Yeah, it sounded like a good conversation, and obviously the downside for that is Jack caught him in a couple of traps. But I appreciated it. Sounded like someone that you could have a conversation with.
So you know what? You say Jack caught him in a couple of traps. The thing is, Jack didn't catch him, and maybe this is why politicians don't want to just think as they go. They want to have the pre-prepared lines, because he offered some of those things that Jack went, hang on. Like it wasn't like a setup, I know where you're going, which is what you think about of a trap. And maybe what you're saying, Chewie, is revealing why politicians stay on script, because if they have an authentic and genuine situation, they may have a different question to answer that they weren't prepared for, maybe.
That's a really good point. But I think my gut reaction here is, like, if you walk into a bar and you saw James Meager, I would have no problems approaching him and going, hey, man, want to chat to you about a few things. And I think you could have a conversation. Whereas with the more senior ministers, maybe it's because they're too media trained within an inch of their lives, jaded in the job too long. I don't think you could. It's an interesting feeling.
Yeah, but maybe, I don't disagree with you, but maybe it once again just reeks back right to the start of this conversation where I made the horrible claim that he might be our DEI hire, meaning he's not important enough in their list of ministers to be given that thing we hate most of all, which is the PR training. Maybe his approachability, and you didn't say this, but for some likability and the ability to have real conversation, just echoes the fact that he hasn't had that secret black book given to him from the cabinet table that says answer the questions like this. Or maybe he's just authentic. Maybe that. Don't know.
He can still be authentic and wrong.
Yeah.
Like he can be authentically pro things that we're against. I just thought that was an interesting thing to notice, because we often don't see that from National.
Master is asking, is it Master? What's DEI? Obviously, I'm putting my tongue firmly in my cheek, but it stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's the go-to word from those on the right that means don't hire too many people who don't deserve to be there, like anyone with melanin in their skin or anyone who doesn't have a peni. Any of those people get hired, it's a DEI hire. They're not really warranting being there. So it's a bit of a joke, implying that he's not really warranting being there, that they're just throwing out some meat to the South Island base. See, when you have to explain the jokes, they never work.
Like a lot of these terms that the right you like to use as a clutch, DEI is the latest one, woke, snowflake, all of this sort of stuff. They don't know. They just know it's a word that sets people off, and they'll just ride it until every shred of meaning from it is gone.
Well, when I used to work in talkback radio, it was PC. Everything's PC.
Oh, yeah, PC got mad.
But
PC's got mad.
When did you last hear that in an actual thing? You don't hear it at all. And I used to, and I've said this before, I used to constantly say to people on the radio who said, oh, but that's just PC. I'd go, can you explain PC to me? And they never could. And I came to the conclusion that basically for the people, the people who use the phrase PC don't actually understand what the word PC means. The same can be said for woke. People who use woke don't understand what it actually means. And I guess, Chewie, what you're saying is the same could be said for DEI. They don't actually understand what it is.
G'day there, Pat. Long-time listener, first-time caller. My name's Kevin from Milton. I used to be able to pour my old engine oil down the creek, down the back of the workshop. And I can't do that now. PC gone mad. These woke tards have stopped me running my business.
You left out DEI. You got the first two out. You've got to get all
I can't
three.
cram that in.
Bang,
Anyway,
bang, bang.
love your work. Bye.